All right, welcome everyone to today's Explainer. Today, we are unlocking what is arguably one of the most ambitious, massive, and just totally mind-blowing interconnected fantasy universes ever put to paper, Brandon Sanderson's Cosmere. Think of it kind of like a shared cinematic universe, like the Marvel universe, but crafted entirely through epic fantasy books. It's this sprawling, deeply fascinating puzzle, and today, we're going to put those pieces together for you. Now, please don't be intimidated by the sheer scale of this universe. We've got a great roadmap today. We'll be going over a welcome to the Cosmere, the foundation of its magic, Adonalsium and the Shards, Worldhoppers and shared secrets, the future space age, and finally, where you should actually start reading.
Okay, let's dive right into Section 1, Welcome to the Cosmere. So first things first, the Cosmere isn't just one incredibly long continuous series of books. It's actually a shared dwarf galaxy. And within this galaxy, you have multiple different planets, and each planet hosts its very own standalone story or series. At first glance, they seem completely separate, but the reality, they are secretly woven into one massive, overarching epic narrative. They all share the exact same underlying physical rules, hidden lore, and even some recurring characters popping up where you least expect them.
To give you a sense of the scale, the major works that make up the Cosmere include the fast-paced heists of Mistborn, the massive, sweeping, epic fantasy of the Stormlight Archive, Elantris, Warbreaker, White Sand, and some of the recent secret projects like Tress of the Emerald Sea, Yumi and the Nightmare Painters, and The Sunlit Man. Now, every single one of these starts as an isolated story. You can read them totally on their own. But once you know what to look for, you start seeing this massive iceberg of crossovers lurking right underneath the surface.
That brings us to Section 2, the foundation of magic.
The absolute crucial concept that ties all these different planets together is something called Investiture. Think of Investiture as the cosmic currency of the Cosmere. It's the raw, universal, magical energy that fuels literally every single supernatural act across every world. So whether that magic condenses down into a physical metal you can swallow, or a strange mist in the air, or glowing liquid light, fundamentally it is all Investiture.
For example, on the planet Scadrial, you have allomancy, right? This is where people consume and then burn specific metals internally to get physical or mental powers. Now, contrast that with the planet Nulthus, which has awakening. That magic uses portable breaths of life to animate entirely inanimate objects. They look vastly different, but because they are both fueled by investiture, they follow the exact same underlying cosmic rules that involve the user's intent, their spiritual identity, and their connection to the universe. And that same exact rulebook, it applies to Ferrochemy, Hymallurgy, Surge Binding, Aeon Door, and every other magic system out there in this galaxy. Now, to fully grasp how all this magic actually operates, we have to look at the architecture of the universe itself. The Cosmere is divided into 3 realms. You've got the physical realm, which is just normal reality, where the planets and the people actually live. Then there's the spiritual realm, this wild place of pure concepts that exists entirely outside of time. But the middle one, the cognitive realm, is where things get really fascinating. It's literally the realm of thought, and because the empty space in the physical universe has no one around to think about it, the cognitive realm compresses all that empty space down. So what does that mean? It means if you know how to access the cognitive realm, you can literally walk between different planets in just a matter of weeks.
Moving right along to Section 3, Adonalsium and the Shards.
Let's rewind to the very beginning. At the start of everything, there was Adonalsium. This was the primordial creator entity of the Cosmere. Maybe it was a conscious god, maybe it was just a cosmic force, we aren't entirely sure. But roughly 10,000 years ago, on the original human planet of Yolen, something monumental happened. 17 conspirators used 4 primal, universe-altering commands called Dawn Shards to basically orchestrate the murder of this god. This massive event is known as the Shattering, and it divided infinite power, setting the stage for every single conflict you'll read about in these books. When Adonalsium shattered, its infinite power broke into exactly 16 fragments, and these are known as shards. 16 of those original conspirators actually took up these fragments, essentially becoming godlike entities themselves, called vessels. But there's a huge catch here. Each shard is bound to a specific divine intent. If you take up the Shard of Ruin, for example, eventually you are compelled to destroy. If you take up honor, you become completely obsessed with keeping oaths. The vessels are effectively trapped by their fragments' specific intent. They dispersed across the Cosmere, settling on various planets and entirely shaping their magic and culture. Like on Scadrial, the Shards of Ruin and Preservation settled there and completely defined how that world works. But over the millennia, that cosmic balance has shifted pretty dramatically. Today, only 10 of those original 16 shards are still independent and active. 4 of them have been completely splintered or destroyed, mostly by a particularly malicious shard known as Odium, who has basically been on this terrifying cosmic killing spree. And then really uniquely, 2 of the shards, Preservation and Ruin, were actually combined together by a mortal into a single, highly complex hybrid shard called Harmony. Okay, Section 4, Worldhoppers and Shared Secrets. Let's talk about the people traversing this universe.
Remember that cognitive realm we talked about earlier? The act of using it to travel is called world hopping. Basically, world hoppers find these localized, massive concentrations of magic called perpendicularities, which act as portals straight into the cognitive realm. And there are entire secret societies using this method to trade secrets and magic across the galaxy. We're talking about groups like the 17th Shard, who hold to a strict non-intervention pact. There's the ruthless intelligence organization called the Ghostbloods. There are even scholars from Silverlight, which is an entire functional city built completely inside the cognitive realm. This interconnected travel is what leads to those jaw-dropping crossover moments, like when the sentient talking sword named Nightblood, which was forged on the planet Nalthis, just suddenly shows up in the hands of a character in the Stormlight Archive.
But out of all these secret groups, scholars, and travelers, there is one specific individual who really stands out. He's this mysterious man who manages to appear in almost every single Cosmere book. You might recognize him as the King's Wit in the Stormlight Archive, maybe a storyteller in Warbreaker, or an informant in Mistborn. He goes by a lot of aliases, but his most common name is Hoid. Hoid's backstory is absolutely incredible. He was actually the 17th conspirator right there at the shattering of Adonalsium, but he made a choice that defines everything about who he is. He refused to take a shard. He completely rejected godhood just so he could keep his freedom. And he paid a huge price for being involved. He is functionally immortal now, but he is physically incapable of causing direct physical harm to anyone. So what does he do? He wanders the entire Cosmere, collecting different magic systems from all these different planets, pulling strings behind the scenes and telling stories, all to oppose that tyrannical shard, Odium.
That brings us to Section 5, the future space age. And this is where things get really wild. So we've looked at the past, starting 10,000 years ago with the Shattering. And currently, most of what we're reading takes place in the present centuries, where planets are mostly isolated from each other, fighting proxy wars directed by their local shards. But if you chart the trajectory of this timeline, it is doing something amazing. These individual fantasy stories are gradually building up toward a full-blown sci-fi future. By the time we hit Mistborn Era 4, the Cosmere is going to enter a true space age. Magic is literally going to become technology. Worlds are going to openly collide, and we are going to see actual spacecraft using hybrid magical systems for faster-than-light travel. It is incredibly ambitious.
Finally, Section 6, Where to Start Reading. With a universe this huge, you've got a few fantastic entry points. If you're looking for a fast-paced heist trilogy that perfectly showcases just how cool Sanderson's magic systems are, definitely start with Mistborn, The Final Empire. If you want that massive, sweeping, 1,000-page epic fantasy experience, pick up The Way of Kings. If you'd prefer a really colorful, standalone romance without committing to a massive series right away, Warbreaker is excellent. You can read them in publication order starting with Elantris, or honestly, just jump into whatever sounds most interesting to you. Every single book functions beautifully as a standalone story before it slowly starts revealing those mind-blowing Cosmere ties. Which really just brings us to the ultimate endgame of this entire universe. With shards being splintered and some even being combined, we're left wondering, will the 16 shards ever be completely reunited to reform the primordial god Adonalsium? And maybe more importantly for you, are you ready to jump into the Cosmere and start spotting all these hidden connections for yourself? The universe is waiting, so grab a book and let the journey begin.